I lived in a small apartment complex in Tacoma, Washington. It was an old 3-story building painted a pale yellow, with rusty iron balconies and wooden stairs that creaked whenever someone walked past. I rented apartment 2A, the middle floor. Downstairs lived an older couple, and upstairs, apartment 3B, was occupied by someone I'll never forget. The landlord said his name was Robert Lane, in his early 50s. He lived alone, quiet, polite, but a little weird. I didn't pay much attention. The area was quiet, the rent was cheap, and it was close to work. I just needed a place to sleep during the day and work at night, that was it. My job was as a gas station attendant. I worked the night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Every time I got off work, I would come home before sunrise. The hallway empty, the yellow light cast by an old shade, and often I would hear something above the ceiling, slow, heavy, dragging footsteps, like someone walking in the dark. I thought Mr. Lane must have gotten up early, but what struck me as strange was the footsteps only started right when I opened the door to my house. I slept during the day, worked at night. My life was wrapped in 2 silences. I never saw Mr. Lane in the hallway. I didn't hear the TV. I didn't hear music. No one came to visit. I even suspected that apartment 3B was empty. But every time I went up to the balcony to smoke, I had the feeling that someone was above me, looking down. Every time I looked up, the curtains of apartment 3B would flutter, then close. I told myself it was just my imagination. But then one morning, when I came home, there was a note tucked under my door. White paper, scrawled, "You shouldn't go out on the balcony at night. Someone is watching." No name, no signature. I stood still for a few minutes. I climbed to the 3rd floor. Door 3B was ajar, paint peeling, old rusty lock. I knocked lightly, no answer. From inside, I heard something like metal scraping lightly on the floor, then silence. I stepped back. From that day on, I didn't dare sit on the balcony anymore, but I still felt that gaze. Once, while lying in bed, I heard footsteps right above me, stopping right at the head of my bed. The footsteps stayed in place for a long time, then continued. I looked at my watch, 3:12 a.m. A week later, I met the landlord in the parking lot. I asked, "Is Mr. Lane still living here?" She looked at me, paused for a second, then nodded. "Yes, why?" I said I was just curious because I rarely saw him. She replied, "He's very private, but he pays regularly. He should be fine." I tried to believe it. But then things started to get worse. I found someone bumping into my door. A small scratch right where the handle was. It wasn't old, it was new, shiny metal. Once, I heard what sounded like a camera shutter as I opened the door to go outside. I turned around. The hallway was empty. But at the end of the hallway, near the elevator, a shadow passed by. That night, I heard something heavy falling from the floor above, then the sound of water. In the morning, my kitchen ceiling was damp and dripping. I called maintenance. They came, climbed up to the 3rd floor to check. 10 minutes later, I heard someone shouting, "Call the police." I ran up. The door to 3B was open. The stench poured out, strong, like rust mixed with something rotting. The room was dark, the ceiling light half burned, a yellowish glow. Water from the bathtub spilled onto the floor, mixed with something reddish-brown. On the table near the window, a camera on a tripod, its lens pointed at my apartment balcony. No one was in the room. The police arrived, cordoning off the area. I was questioned for more than 3 hours. They said Mr. Lane had been missing for at least 2 weeks. The only things in the room were a few old things, unwashed dishes, a sodden carpet, and a small damp notebook with scribbled writing. I wasn't allowed to see it, but an officer whispered to me afterward. He wrote all about you, about your habits, your coming home time, how many cigarettes you smoked, and what time you went out on the balcony. A chill ran down my spine. I asked if they knew where he went. They said no, only blood in the bathtub, and footprints that stretched to the back door of the building. I asked to move out immediately. The landlord agreed, even helped me pack. But before I left, I went back to the second floor to get my car keys. As I passed the stairs, I heard 3 knocks from the ceiling. 3, steady, slow. I looked up. Apartment 3B was dark, only the window frame reflecting the hallway light. I tried to reassure myself, just the old house sounds. But on the last night, as I loaded my things into the car, I felt someone watching. I stood in the parking lot, looked up. 3B's window was open, and a figure stood behind the curtain, thin, tall, motionless. I watched for a few seconds, then the curtain closed. The next morning I left Tacoma. I rented another apartment in the next city, trying to forget about it. But a few weeks later, when I checked the doorbell camera in the new place, I saw a relay message from the old system in the old building. The clip was blurry, only 3 seconds. Hallway 2A, my balcony, shot from above, exactly like the frame from the camera in 3B that day. I sent the clip to the police. They said they found nothing. The old system camera was disconnected, unable to play back. They told me to rest. I took the camera off and threw it away. But every night I woke up at 3 a.m. the exact time the footsteps stopped above my bed. And in my dreams, I always heard someone say very quietly, "You shouldn't go out on the balcony at night." I used to live on Elmwood Street, a quiet street on the edge of a small town in Oregon. It was an old-fashioned neighborhood. Single-story houses, small lawns, low wooden fences, and mostly older people. I rented house number 28, near the end of the street, across from a vacant lot with a few poplar trees. The house across from me, number 33, was owned by a neighbor I'll never forget. When I first moved in, the landlord just said, "Her name is Margaret. She's lived there for over 20 years. Quiet, but kind." I nodded, not paying attention. I lived alone, worked as a freelance designer, slept during the day and worked at night, and barely interacted with anyone. Life in Elmwood was quiet, until I started noticing that the house across from me never turned off the lights. At first I thought she forgot. The living room light in apartment 33 was always on all night, a yellow light shining through the window, casting a shadow on my wall whenever I sat working late. On rainy nights, the water droplets on the glass reflected the light, making it seem like it was moving, like someone was walking inside. But I never saw anyone, no shadow, no TV, no music, just light. After a few weeks I got curious, so I tried to say hello. I bought some cookies, knocked on the door. It took almost a minute to hear footsteps. The door opened slightly, and I saw her, Margaret. She was about 60, with silver hair and a waxy complexion. Her eyes were a little cloudy, her gaze slow and unfocused. I smiled and said I was the new neighbor and wanted to say hello. She looked at me for a few seconds, then said very softly, like the wind, "You live in the house across the street, right?" I nodded. She pursed her lips, then said, "I see you every night." That made me pause. I asked, "See me? Through the window?" She smiled slightly, but didn't answer. The door closed. I thought she was lonely, or slightly insane. But that night, While I was working, I looked out the window. The light was still on, and for the first time I saw a shadow behind the curtain. She was standing there, facing me, motionless. I turned off the lights in the house, sat still, and looked back. The shadow was still there. I remembered the clock at that time read 2:13 a.m. I told myself not to let my imagination run wild. The next day, when I went out to take out the trash, I found a dead cat in the middle of the path. There was no blood, just a strangled look. There was a deep rope mark on its neck. I thought it must be a stray dog, but what made me shiver was a small white ribbon tied around the cat's neck. It was exactly like the ribbon I had seen hanging in the window of house number 33. I thought about going over to ask, but then I stopped. A week later, the power went out. The whole neighborhood was dark, except for house number 33. The light was bright yellow, so strong that it reflected off my wall. I grabbed my flashlight, intending to go over and see if I could use the power. But as I got closer, I heard something coming from inside her house, a low, steady sound, like the mumble of several people talking at once. I stood outside the door for a few seconds, then knocked gently. No one answered. I knocked again. At that moment, the light in the house went out. The whole street was dark. I went back. The next morning, the power came back on. I looked over at her house. The light was still on. From then on, I started to pay more attention. I noticed that every morning, around 5:30, a different figure left her house. It wasn't Margaret. The man was smaller, slightly stooped, wearing a dark coat. I only saw him through the gap in the curtains, his figure going out the back door, across the empty lot, and disappearing among the birches. I told this story to the landlord. She just shrugged. Margaret used to live with her son, but he died 3 years ago. Car accident. I was silent. One night I heard a knock on the door. I looked at the clock, 1:27 a.m. I went out, didn't open it, just looked through the peephole. Outside was Margaret, her hair loose, her face expressionless. I hesitated, asked through the door, "Is there anything wrong, Margaret?" She answered softly, "There's someone standing in your garden." I opened the door, looked out. No one, just the swaying shadows of the trees. When I turned back, she was gone without saying another word. The next morning, I saw long wet footprints in front of the house, bare, small, like a woman's. In the following days, I began to feel like someone was in my house. The wooden floor creaked slightly at night. The cupboard door opened a crack even though I clearly remembered closing it. And every time I walked out into the garden, I had the feeling that someone had just left. The dew-covered grass was pressed down, as if someone had just stood there. One night, I decided to mount a camera in front of the window. I just wanted to see how strong the light from house number 33 was. But the next morning, when I checked, I found that the video had been interrupted at 2:13 a.m., the exact time I had first seen a shadow standing in my grandmother's house. The footage before the signal cut off showed someone walking past my window, coming from inside. I thought the camera was broken, so I took it off. But that afternoon, when I opened the door to get the mail, I found a folded piece of paper on the porch. The paper was yellowed and scrawled. "You shouldn't look over there. They don't want you to." I called the police. They came, knocked on the door of number 33. No answer. They unlocked it, checked. It was dark inside, covered in dust. There was no food, no sign of anyone living there. The living room was cold, musty, and on the table was a photo frame turned upside down. When they turned it over, it showed Margaret and a young man. But the strange thing was that the person in the photo looked like me very clearly, only a few years younger. The police asked me if I had any relatives. I shook my head. They concluded that the house had been empty for at least a few years. The previous owner had died in a nursing home in 2018. I didn't understand. All I knew was that the house, with its yellow lights always on, shouldn't have been occupied. I moved out 2 weeks later, but there was one thing I never said. The night before I left, I sat on the porch, looking across the street one last time. Number 33 had its lights off, but in the window frame, I saw a figure standing there. It was Margaret, looking at me. Very clearly, she didn't move, didn't blink. The moonlight fell on her face, and I noticed. Her eyes were no longer cloudy. They were empty black. I turned away. When I looked again, the window was empty. I live elsewhere now, in nice, quiet neighborhoods. But sometimes, when I open the window at night, I see a faint yellow light reflected somewhere in the distance, on my wall, even though no one around here uses that kind of light. And each time, I hear that voice in my head, small, trembling, but clear. I see you every night. I lived in an old apartment complex in Sacramento, California, in 2019. It was a long row of houses, narrow hallways, beige walls, faded brown carpet. I lived in apartment 2F, in the middle of the row, and at the end of the hallway was apartment 2H, where I had a neighbor I would never forget. The building was built in the 72nd. You could hear everything through the walls. Your neighbors coughing, the sound of running water, the radio. But apartment 2H was different. It was so quiet. No one came in or out. No voices, no music, no TV, not even a door opening and closing. When I first moved in, I asked the manager, "Is the room at the end of the hallway occupied?" He replied, "Yes, a man named Carl Simmons. He's been there a long time. Quiet, lives alone." I nodded, not thinking anything of it. The first night, as I was packing, I heard the sound of things being dragged across the floor from the end of the hallway. Slowly, steadily, then stopping. I thought someone was moving things at night, but when I opened the door and looked out, the hallway was empty. 2H's door was closed. In the following days, I noticed something was off. Every morning when I went to work, I always found an old newspaper placed in front of 2H's door. It was always blown askew by the wind, damp, but never lost, as if someone had put it down, picked it up, and put it back. One evening, when I came home late, I saw the door to 2H was slightly open. The light from inside the house was shining a pale, cold white light. I was about to go on, but I heard something inside, small like a whisper. I stopped for a few seconds, trying to listen. Then the light went out. I saw a figure standing just behind the door, motionless. I stepped back, trying to appear calm, and opened my door. When my door closed, I heard the door at the end of the hall also close, slowly. From then on, I always felt like someone was watching me every time I passed. I worked in an office 20 minutes away. Every morning, I left home at 7:30. One time, when I went out, I saw the door to 2H wide open. It was dark inside. There were long tire marks on the carpet, as if someone had pushed something heavy. I called out loudly, "Mr. Simmons, are you okay?" No one answered. I walked closer, called again. The door closed very slowly, as if someone had pulled it from inside. I didn't wait any longer and went straight ahead. That night, I heard a knock on the wall, regular, 3 beats at a time. It came from the direction of 2H. I checked my watch, 2:43 a.m. The sound lasted for nearly 10 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, I told the manager. He looked at me, frowning. Are you sure? Carl moved out. I was stunned. When did he move out? About 2 weeks ago. I locked the door. This building is old. The wiring is noisy. I wanted to believe it. But the next night, I saw a light coming through the crack in the door of 2H, a weak white light, like a TV with no signal. I started hearing more. The sound of chairs being moved, people walking in the hallway while I was lying down. I installed a camera in front of the door to see who was passing through at night. When I checked the next morning, I saw the image. The hallway was empty, but there was a shadow at the end of the row, right by 2H. The shadow stayed still for almost a minute, then disappeared when the hallway light went off on a timer. I deleted the video, thinking it might be a bug. But the next night, while I was watching a movie, the lights in my room flickered 3 times, then went out. In the darkness, I heard a knock on the door, 3 slow, steady beats. I went out and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but as I looked longer, I saw something on the wall opposite, at eye level. I turned on the flashlight, and my heart sank. It was a handprint covered in white powder. I asked the manager to check 2H again. He unlocked it and walked in with me. The room was empty. No furniture, no tables or chairs. The floor was covered in thick dust, except for an old wheelchair in the middle of the room, and a damp newspaper lying directly beneath it. It was dated 3 weeks earlier, the same one I saw outside the door every day. 2F still there. I asked the manager about Carl. He sighed and said quietly, "Actually, he's dead. Had a stroke in the bathroom. The police took his body away the day I told you to move in." I didn't say anything. That night, I packed up my things, planning to find a new place the next morning. But around 3 a.m., I heard something outside, the sound of a chair's wheels rolling slowly across the carpet toward my door. It stopped right in front of my house. I sat still, my heart pounding. Then 3 knocks, light, in the same rhythm as always. I didn't dare look through the peephole. All I heard was something scraping against the door, like metal scraping, then a very faint breathing sound. After a while, the wheels returned, fading away. The next morning, when I opened the door, I saw an old newspaper placed neatly on the door. At the bottom was handwritten in black ink, "You will get used to the silence." I left the apartment that day. The manager didn't ask why. When I finished, I took one last look at the hallway. At the end of the row, door 2H was ajar, a faint white light coming from inside. The hallway wind blew through, carrying with it something very small, like a chair rolling a few inches. I live in a different place now, a new apartment, bright lights, thick walls, no one knocking at night. But sometimes, when I lie in silence, I still hear the sound of wheels rolling on the carpet, fading away, then stopping in front of my room, just for a moment, then silence.